Hello guys, I am Dr. Siddharth Kulkarni, a chartered mechanical engineer. Welcome back to Dr. Sid's channel. I hope you guys are staying safe, staying at home and looking after yourselves. If you remember in my last video, I had given you a brief reason why to do a PhD and particularly why to do it in the UK. In this video, I would like to give you a good introduction or would like to tell you on how to write a good PhD thesis and successfully pass your viva by following the tips and guidelines that I am about to show you. You can, however, use the same guidelines at any level, including bachelor's or undergraduate, I mean bachelor's as well as master's level, because the fundamentals are same. They can be applied to any level of thesis or dissertation that you guys might undertake. So let us begin. But before beginning, I would like to give you a small introduction on what you are supposed to be expecting from this video. I have divided this video into 4 parts or 4 categories. In the first part, I will give you an introduction and on what a generic PhD looks like. I will also give you some big do's and don'ts, what you should be doing and what you should be certainly avoiding in order to do a successful PhD thesis. In the second part, I would like to give you some information on what do the PhD supervisors expect from you as PhD students and what you should be doing and what you shouldn't be doing when you are interacting with your PhD supervisors. In the third part of this video, which is the most important part of your entire PhD journey, is I will tell you about what do the external examiners require you to do or what do they expect from you in the PhD viva. And finally, I'll give you a brief introduction on what a PhD timeline looks like and final tips to do a successful PhD. I hope you guys enjoyed. So let us begin on our first part, which is the PhD thesis itself and what you guys should be writing. Generically, of course, it depends from university to university and the topic that you have chosen, but this is a generic guideline, so let's move on to it. So, generic PhD thesis. Let us start knowing by how a PhD thesis is written or what are the main constituents or ingredients of a PhD thesis. A PhD thesis would normally look like it would have an abstract, an introduction, a literature review, a research methodology, data analysis, results, conclusion, bibliography. Sometimes this bibliography is also considered as a place where you put in references, the references that the work which you obtain some information outside, which is not yours, you put into there. And also you could have another section which is called as appendices, where you could put your own publications, or you would normally expect the examiners to read, but it's not that important within the main body. You may have noticed that I haven't included a title page, contents page, or acknowledgements. That's, guys, very generic. You should have it anyway. So let us start by knowing what an abstract is. In the abstract, you would normally include a summary of your entire thesis. Why have you done this PhD? What does this PhD thesis include? What is the scope? Where have you stopped by? What is your contribution? And what are the typical data sources? Moving on to the introduction part. Introduction part is slightly different than the abstract itself. Abstract gives a brief summary, but however, introduction on the PhD thesis itself, which is the first chapter of your PhD thesis, is one of the most important chapters of your PhD thesis, where you should introduce the topic, you should introduce your PhD thesis, you should also explain about what the readers are expecting in consecutive chapters. Like at the end of the chapter 1, you can give a brief summary of each chapter, what the reader should expect from this thesis. Remember, guys, it has to tell a story. Now I will talk about what a story is. I don't mean a storytelling exercise, but you will come to know as I include my next slides. You will obviously come to know what I mean by telling a story. So moving on to the literature review chapter. The literature review chapter is nothing but you examine what is currently going on or what has happened in the past within your chosen subject or within your chosen domain. You will have to identify a gap which will be your own bit to do the PhD thesis itself, or that will be your PhD thesis. What I mean by that, if you remember in my previous video, I had told you a PhD is a novel contribution or something new that is generated to take the research community further. So you would have identified a gap, you would have clearly demonstrated that within the research literature review chapter itself, that this is the gap that I have found, and hey, I am going to solve that gap, and that's what my contribution to the research community is going to be. Now moving on, you have identified the gap, you have started working on it, but you need a method, or you need a research methodology which includes different types of research methods. Now they can be qualitative, they can be quantitative, or they can be mixed methods. I am not going to go in deep about research methods, but should you wish me to do another video, I am more than happy to do another video just explaining about what different research methodologies are. But choose the best research methodology backed up by the literature, as well as discuss that with your supervisors, and then you can move on to do a data analysis and gather your results. Now sometimes number 5 and number 6 are called as results and analysis or analytical results. It depends again from domain to domain, but you would have collected the data, you would have processed the data, you will have to present it, and you will have to interpret the data in your own words. Guys, I cannot stress the importance of in your own words. I will tell you what happens if you don't write it in your own words in the coming sections of this video. Now, as I said, we have already covered results and data analysis. Within the results chapter, you can also speak about the outcome of what you have demonstrated or you have done in the PhD, or these are your results. To give you an example, a typical engineering PhD would be you have done some simulations, or you have done some tests, and you have actually interpreted them, you have processed the data, and you have started writing about the discussion which comes in the chapter 6 itself. Or what are the outcomes, what did you find out, what was so interesting, what was your novel contribution, and how you did it. Did you do it differently than what's being already done, or did you adapt existing methods to solve a new problem? That's what it's all about. Now, in the conclusion chapter, this is where you highlight the conclusions and your future predictions as well at the same time within the conclusion chapter. So you will be providing and summarizing useful conclusions of your entire PhD thesis. This is where you have to tell the reader, you have to conclude, like the ending credits. Finally, moving on to bibliography, as I mentioned before, you will include the references of whatever citations you have undertaken. You may have read a few books, you may have, please make sure you cite them. You acknowledge other people's work within the thesis itself, apart from what isn't yours. And there might be an appendices chapter where you may want to include your publications. For example, you may want to include a patent that was applied through your PhD thesis, or whatever information that is an additional information in relation to your 50 to 80,000 words PhD thesis. Please make sure you stick to the guidelines that are given to you by your university, and you do a very good job. So I'll now tell you what are the big do's and what are the things that you should be avoiding when writing a PhD thesis. So here are some big do's and don'ts. So make sure it is your own work. I cannot stress the importance of it being your own work. Do not copy, guys. there are many ways where people can find out, and your 3-year journey can just go down the drain. Your reputation will get ruined, your supervisor reputation gets ruined, as well as the university reputation gets ruined if you copy someone else's work. Do not forget to acknowledge others. If it's not yours, hey, be honest, guys, completely honest, and honesty is the best policy, as they say. So make sure you acknowledge others. Your work is original, including your data, your methods, and the application. Make sure you focus on interesting information. Nobody likes to read a boring PhD thesis, or nobody likes repetitive stuff. Make sure you have attention to detail. You tell the reader what you have done, what are the limits. Make sure you have good reasons and effective conclusions. So this is what you should be taking care of, or this is what you should be doing when writing a PhD thesis. Now, what you shouldn't be doing, you should certainly avoid submitting it elsewhere. Remember, guys, a PhD can be done only once. By that I mean you can do another PhD in a different subject or in a different domain or on a different topic, but you can only do one PhD for your one novel idea. So please, please, please do not submit it elsewhere. Wherever you are doing, or whichever university you are doing, please just focus on submitting the PhD thesis to that university. Now, nobody likes to read poorly illustrated figures or errors which they are unreadable, and there are spelling mistakes. How would you now, for example, you log into BBC website and you read the news and you see loads and loads of spelling mistakes, and you don't see the photos that they are trying to show us properly? How would you feel? Exactly, guys, you wouldn't feel good, and you wouldn't read it. Your examiners might get agitated. Poor summary, not appreciating what comes next. Now, for example, you have done your literature review chapter. Summarize that literature review chapter within a paragraph. I'm not asking you to do more than a paragraph, or at maximum you would have to do 2 paragraphs at the end of the literature review. So within the first paragraph you would say, in the literature review chapter, I found this, I found that, this is where the gap was, this is what I'm going to improve on, and in the next chapter, which is my research methodology chapter, I will try and apply a research methodology on the gap that I have found to do my own bit, to produce a novel contribution, to do my thesis. Plagiarism, this is the biggest, I should say, crime that anybody can do when doing a PhD. Plagiarism is copying someone else's work and not citing it, or presenting it as your own. Now imagine, guys, somebody enters in your house and they rob you and they just go away. That's exactly how people will feel if you do not acknowledge others' work. Also, at the same time, make sure you have a solid theory base or theory basis. You are not reinventing the wheel. So let us move on to the next bit, which is the supervisor expectations from you, or what do the supervisors expect from you. Now, what are the supervisor expectations? You may have 2 supervisors. One will be your main supervisor or the primary supervisor, and you may have a second supervisor depending on the university, or you may have 3 PhD supervisors. You may have an industrial supervisor as well. If you're sponsored by the industry, you may have, it depends from case to case, or students to student basis, doing a PhD within their different domain. What do they expect from you? Guys, you are doing your PhD. It is your responsibility to write and deliver a good PhD thesis. By that I mean you are the driver of this PhD journey. Should you crash, or should you have any problems, please, please, please do not blame it on your supervisors, because the supervisors are just there to guide you, to support you wherever you may go wrong. They may have an expertise within that area, but you are the ultimate expert, or you will be the expert within that particular PhD. As I said, every PhD is novel, every PhD produces a new contribution, so you are the expert within that field. So please do not blame on your supervisors. At the end, They want you to pass. Everybody wants you to do a good job because they also have a responsibility to increase their supervisory numbers because that looks good on their CV as well. Moving, it is definitely a challenging task. Trust me on this one. I have already done a PhD, and writing a PhD thesis needs a severe discipline. By discipline, I mean I am not doubting you guys. Whenever you do your PhD, or if you're doing your PhD, we all are definitely focused on one thing, and that is getting the results out. But we forget the importance of how good the thesis should be, because at the end, the thesis itself is the mirror to demonstrate how you will do in your viva, and we will discuss that in the next few slides. You should flesh out an idea. Should you have an idea, make sure you apply plenty of flesh to it. By that I mean you nourish it, nurture it, feed it, make it a big fat PhD thesis. At the end, you have to sell your PhD thesis. You are the expert, as I said previously. You will have to sell it. Be confident enough, be bold enough, make sure your idea is a superb idea, your PhD is the best PhD thesis you could have ever done. Don't flush it out. What I mean, if you have an idea, write it down, discuss it with your supervisors. There may be some instances where you will disagree with your supervisors. There will be problems, but that doesn't mean you just chuck it in the bin. You don't consider that idea. That may be the idea you were looking for to do your PhD. Normally, what you would be basically doing is, I cannot stress the importance again, guys. Please write as you go. By that I mean write continuously. Start writing from year 1, because when it comes to year 3, you will be panicking and time will run out. You will not have enough time to write your PhD thesis. Don't leave it at the end or at the last minute. Have realistic goals and be consistent throughout. By that I mean be consistent in the writing style that you take on writing your PhD thesis. If you're supposed to be writing in the third person or whatever tests you have done, make sure you say I, not we, because at the end, as I said, guys, this is your PhD. You will be selling that idea to the external examiners and the university, and you will have to convince them why the university should award you the highest qualification, that is PhD, for just for selling your idea. Make sure you present gaps and justify your rationale. By that, I did mention about this when you are conducting your literature review. Whenever you conduct your literature review, you will find out few gaps, and that's where you will have to work on. That's what will give you your PhD, and you will improve that improve that concept, and make sure you clearly identify your own contribution. How are you adding value? What have you done? I'm not saying everybody should get positive results. You can also get negative results, and you can also prove that something doesn't work. That's still novel, that is still good, and that's exactly what a PhD is. What are the big do's and don'ts when you're dealing with your supervisors? Back up your work. It is very important, and you guys might be saying, this guy keeps talking about being important. Yes, everything you do within your PhD is equally important. Have plenty of backups. I will give you my own personal experience. When I was doing my PhD, I had to run plenty of engineering simulations which ran for weeks and weeks and weeks. And imagine, guys, having a power cutoff within the whole building where you are running your 3 to 4 weeks of work, and it just gets lost like this due to a power cut. It's not your fault. You can't blame anyone. It's just one of those unfortunate events which happens. You just have to deal with it. But make sure you have plenty of backups. You use an outline. Be organized. Have Gantt charts. Make sure you plan enough time for writing to do all your tests, and you meet and update your supervisors regularly. Again, choose your examiners carefully. I will come back to that in my next section, where you will, now you guys must be thinking, why has he, got just that in bold, and he's saying choose your examiners carefully. Hey, I'll come back to that in a few minutes time. What you should be avoiding, as I said previously, do not leave writing at the last minute. Don't be hard on yourself, guys. PhD is an interesting journey. I did it. My friends whom I know who have done it, they all enjoyed doing this PhD because they were passionate about doing this PhD. And why would you do something which you're not passionate about? If you're not passionate about something, I mean, we all are passionate about traveling or eating. We just don't go there because we need to kill time. So why do a PhD if you're not passionate about? Don't be hard on yourself. That kills productivity. Be self-critic. Your supervisors will have another 6 to 7 students hassling them to read their own work. They might not read your entire thesis. They might not be able to give you the feedback that you expect them to give you feedback, but that doesn't necessarily mean you don't have to be a self-critique. What I mean is, be your own examiner. You can examine your own work because you're writing it. Who can be the best judge? It is none other than yourself. So let's move on to the next bit, which tells us about what exactly happens in the PhD Viva and what do the external examiners expect from you at the time of PhD Viva. In this part, but before moving on to this part, congratulations, you have submitted your PhD thesis. You were confident enough that it was worth submitting it. You have done all the hard work. You have identified your examiners. Well done, guys. 50% of your job is already done, and now you are waiting for the deadline day or the judgment day, or what I mean in our case is your PhD Viva. What do the external examiners expect from you, or what exactly happens in the PhD Viva? What exactly happens is, it is a discussion where the examiner wants to know that you have done this work. You can clearly justify your choices. We will move on to that now. As I said, examiners expect you to have presented a good storyline. Now, if you recall in the previous minutes, or as I said previously, I will explain what a story should look like. It should look like a smooth narration. Now, let's put it, I'll give you another example. So you give it to your friend. He is completely, or he or she, they are completely unaware of your topic. They are they are different experts. So in my case, I did a PhD in mechanical engineering. I gave it to my doctor friends, medical doctors. So if they could understand what I had written, definitely, and they could ask me questions, what could be a better way to improve your thesis? Because until you submit it, you have a chance to improve it. So they kept on asking me questions and I answered them. So that made an interesting scientific discussion. That's exactly what the examiners are there to find out. I did tell you, choose your external examiners carefully. By that, what I meant was, if the external examiners are not from your field, if, for example, you're doing an engineering PhD and you met a guy at a conference who was an expert in social sciences, that's not going to work. They will ask you loads and loads of fundamental questions. They will be more objective and they will be more critical because they come from a different background. That will not go down well, and you will start panicking and you will not give the performance, or you would have rehearsed. Obviously everybody does rehearse before doing a PhD Viva, or a mock intro, or a mock PhD Viva, before going and attempting the actual PhD Viva. Now, there are only 3 criteria where the examiners will basically, that's what's in the UK anyway. You get a PhD pass. It's very difficult that anybody gets a first time pass without any corrections. Majority of the people get PhD with minor corrections, where you are just asked to do minor tweaks here and there. You have been asked to add some information or take out some information from your thesis after the discussion or after the Viva. The third category is PhD with major corrections, or you may have to resubmit the entire thesis, or you may also have to do another viva should the external examiners feel less confident about your work. And finally, it's a fail. I don't think anybody would allow you to go to that stage. Your supervisors will not recommend. But let me tell you one thing, guys, it is at your own discretion when you want to submit your PhD thesis. It is, as I said, you are the driver of your PhD journey. So what do the external examiners typically look for in the PhD viva? Are your research aims and objectives clear? So whatever research aims you had, have they been met? Have you conducted a thorough literature review? Did you identify the gap properly, and have you worked on it properly? So they might ask, have you read this paper which was published last week, which says this and that? And if you're unaware of that, they might mark you down on that. Do your results and analysis support your methodology? Have you, undertaken an appropriate research methodology for your subject to gather and and analyze your own results? Did you need to do a comparative analysis? Did you need to do surveys? Did you need to go and talk to experts within your field, get their feedback and record it, of course with their permission? Did you do any experimental tests? And if you did not have the experimental data valid, how did you validate or verify your results? Those are the kind of questions that your external examiners will be asking you. And most importantly, they will be judging you whether if it's your own work. I mean, if you can convince them that you have done the work. If you have done the work, then there is nothing to worry. They can ask you any questions and you will be able to answer those questions. What they are looking for is you can justify the rationale. You can answer the questions that they are asking you. So let's move on to some big do's and don'ts. What do the external examiners like, and what do the external examiners don't like? So what do the examiners like and what do the examiners don't like when you are undergoing your PhD viva or when they are reading your PhD thesis? Does your PhD thesis have a sound theoretical base? Does it support with the theory? Has it started from an existing theory and does it improve on it? Have you evidenced sufficiently? Have you acknowledged others? What about your findings? Have they been compared with the literature review, perfectly valid, or have they been compared with any other experimental results? What is the take-home message? By this I mean, what have you exactly done to the PhD thesis, or what have you exactly done within the PhD thesis for the external examiners to award you via university your PhD thesis? What they don't like is lack of biasness or lack of justifications, over or underselling results. You are just self-boasting about what you have done, or you are just criticizing someone else, or you are not presenting, or you're not selling the idea at all. Bad presentation. Nobody likes bad presentation. The best practice you could ever do is practice your own PhD viva in front of a mirror. Look at the actors, look at the BBC news readers or the presenters. The way they present, they are very confident. That's exactly how you should be within your PhD viva. Please avoid spelling mistakes as well as lack of precisions. They get annoyed. They don't. I mean, if I get a PhD thesis, sometimes I even do, PhD vivas and examinations. But if I spot any spelling mistakes, because as I said, it's the highest qualification that any university can grant you. At that level, please use, spell checks, Grammarly, and there are plenty of tools, or even get, your supervisors or someone else whom you can trust to proofread it. That will help you. So I hope you have enjoyed what happens until now. We will now move on to the final part of this video, where I will tell you the timeline, the generic PhD timeline, and some final tips to finish off this video. In this fourth and final section of my video, I would like to tell you about what a typical PhD timeline is. And finally, to end my video, I will give you some tips which will definitely help you and increase your understanding of how to do a successful PhD. Please remember, guys, these this timeline and this timeline typically applies for a 3-year UK full-time PhD, but students who aspire to do PhD part-time within the UK, they would be required to do half of the tasks that are mentioned in the next slide. Please feel free to adapt these slides as and when required for your requirement. For students who are thinking about pursuing their PhD outside UK or currently pursuing their PhD within the UK or outside the UK, it will still help you. So let's move on to the actual PhD timeline. In the year 1, you would be expected to complete your registration. You would start looking into what other people are doing. You would gain a broader understanding of the literature and the research that has been done within your field. In the UK, you would typically be required to undergo research training. It typically has a PG cert in research practices, like postgraduate certificate in research practices, where you would be required to undergo a training within how to conduct proper literature review and how to write good research proposals, a good understanding of research methods. Now, towards the end of your first year, I would have expected you to start finalizing what sort of methodology you would be applying to analyze and collect your data. You can also attend conferences, workshops, or even write a journal paper based on your literature review that you are conducting to identify the gaps and tell the world, listen guys, this is what I will be doing. You make a stake in the ground, and at the end of your year 1, you would be expected to undergo a review process within the internal faculty or within the internal department, where you would have your supervisors. You would discuss your progress, they would review your progress, and if should there be any any more requirements or any help required, they will be offering you more help. Now, moving towards year 2. In year 2, please start writing your thesis. Hey guys, you would have already written your literature review or submitted a conference or journal paper, as I mentioned, within your first year. Guess what? That still counts as your PhD thesis. You could adapt the text within your paper, but don't self-plagiarize. Please take care about that. You would also start conducting surveys or experiments for your thesis. Make sure you update your literature as you go along, because there might be someone who would have already done what you are thinking of doing last week or the week before, and you might have missed that. It has happened to me where I had to change the scope of my project where somebody published work, but you cannot blame anybody, guys. They would have already done it a year before, because publications normally take a year or 18 months to get published. So they were thinking before you. You could submit another journal paper based on your methodology, your surveys, whatever you have conducted. At the end of your second year, you will also attend another progress review. You should also start looking for your potential examiners. Now, by the end of your year 2, you would have identified experts within your field from your literature review. Possibly you would have gone to a few conferences where you would have met nice people. Now, moving towards your year 3, you are expected to continue writing your PhD thesis. Ensure that all of your tests are finished. I cannot stress how important it is that you finish off all the experiments, your data analysis, and you start thinking about writing your discussion and interpreting them, and writing your own discussion chapter. That's what the most important thing is in your final year. You do not want to panic. You need to keep writing from the start. As I have mentioned previously, you would have contacted your potential examiners and select the appropriate one. Please take care you select one of the experts within your own subject. Now, again, you would have gone through a mock viva. They would, your supervisors, may find internal examiners, or there might be different for example, PhD holders or professors within your department who would conduct a mock viva to build up that confidence which is required. It helps. It does help. I did go a mock viva and it helped me. It did give me it built my confidence to go and attempt the final viva a month later. So you would also start preparing for your viva. And moving on, guys. Now, guess what, guys? The better the thesis looks, your PhD viva will go more smoothly, because, as I said, it is the mirror of yourself, of your work done in the past 3 years, the hard work you represent that to your examiners, and that's how they will judge based on your PhD thesis before meeting you face to face on your deadline day or the judgment day, that is the PhD viva itself. Now, make sure you keep final tips to finish off this video, guys. Make sure you start writing, conduct several reviews with yourself, be a self-critique. Don't forget to get it reviewed by someone else, maybe non-specialist, your friend, your neighbor, for instance. Keep realistic timelines. Your thesis is like a marathon. You will have ups and downs, but as you are dedicating 3 years, 3 wonderful years of your life, make sure that marathon, you win that marathon. Basically, avoid procrastination and poor organization. You have to do it now and now and then. You can't delay. You cannot afford any delays within PhDs, especially if you're a self-funded PhD student, because the time keeps on ticking. Should you go in the 4th year, the faculty or the university will not pay your fees. It is you who will have to pay your own fees. So make sure you have good organizational skills, and they will also help you get a good job once you finish your PhD, where you gain time management, excellent time management and organization skills, where you could apply and you could basically show off in the interview. Avoid spelling and grammatical mistakes at all costs. They may cost you your PhD as well. This marks the end of this video, guys. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for staying tuned. Please subscribe, like, share and comment on this video. If you want me to make another video related to PhD or my PhD journey, please let me know in the comment section. Spread the word. Take care of yourselves. Stay safe. Enjoy your time with your family. Your support is greatly appreciated. I'll see you soon. Until then, take care. Namaste.